Go ahead, pour yourself a drink. It doesn't matter if it's early morning or late in the day where you are in the world. I prefer a good bourbon, but whatever you're into, even a strong coffee is perfectly acceptable. As we used to say, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, but it's definitely been 2020 everywhere. So you may need it, but you absolutely deserve it. Sit back, relax, and forget about the worries of the day and get ready for a fun and interesting e-commerce conversation. Our goal with these live streams is to create an outlet for those that make a living in and around e-commerce to discuss topics that matter to us and to educate ourselves on this ever-changing industry. We're going to start with a 30-minute interview to set the stage, but as always, your participation matters. Go ahead and post your questions in the chat as we go along, and we'll address them when we get to the Q&A segment. Let's get this show on the road. Join me deep in the Jamerson Barrel House where we keep the good stuff, that special whiskey that we save just for the live streams. I'm going to find the absolute perfect bottle to pair with today's topic. Spent a lot of time thinking about the whiskey for today's stream. I mean, we're talking about an e-commerce platform that's focused exclusively on the enterprise. So this whiskey has to be barrel proof and not watered down. No, to match this platform, it can't be whiskey for beginners. I mean, this platform is focused on headless. I mean, you just get the engine and you have to build the car. That takes effort. So we can't pick a bottle you can just go get at any store. But you're going to have to put in a little effort to get your hands on this one. So today, I chose Stag Junior from Buffalo Trace Distillery. I mean, this particular bottle is 127.9 proof, so it's going to bring that fire for sure. Now, I'm going to head back to the studio and pour myself a drink while we roll this word from our sponsor, MACH Mojo. The following broadcast is sponsored by MACH Mojo. And I want to take a minute and talk about Magento hosting, because Magento hosting is a lot like hauling stuff in my Tundra here. It's about having a tool that is sized properly for the job. This Tundra's great if I'm on the farm and I want to tow something like my old pickup truck here. But what if I wanted to tow something bigger, like say a space shuttle? Well, then this just isn't the right tool for the job. We know this because Toyota did it. This is a publicity stunt to show how awesome this truck is. And sure, it's pulling it, but look at how slow it is. Those people on foot are literally having to slow down to not pass this thing. And that's a lot like Magento in that you need a proper hosting environment. I've been doing Magento as long as Magento's been doing Magento, and in all of that time, I've never seen somebody who can build a site to overcome improper hosting. And with increasing customer demands, slow is just not acceptable. MACH Mojo understands the needs of Magento merchants because they focus only on Magento hosting, and they've built a reputation as a premier Magento hosting provider. They've built an incredible Magento cloud hosting platform so that their customers enjoy the speed, reliability, and scalability of cloud servers. And if you geek out about technical details, ask them about how they provide automatic horizontal scaling for free. With cloud hosting from MACH Mojo, there's no more worrying about flash sales or Cyber Monday traffic. If you operate a Magento store, then you need to check out MACH Mojo Hosting. The link is in the description of this live stream, or you can just go to MAGEMojo.com. That's MAGEMOJO.com. I appreciate you joining me this Friday afternoon. I've got a great pour here today. I love this Stag Junior. I mean, foolproof is where it's at for me. But the nose on this is that distinct Buffalo Trace. If you guys ever drink any Buffalo Trace products, they all kind of smell very similar. You get that brown sugar, that caramel, that cherry, and on the taste, you get the follow through that, you get the follow through on that brown sugar that the scent promises, along with that strong cherry flavor. And this Stag Junior actually finishes off surprisingly less heat than you would expect from something with this proof. And the barrel proof, no watering down, definitely amplifies its complexity. But as much alcohol is in that, we're going to have to be easy on it this afternoon, or the day could go downhill mighty quickly. There's a lot going on here flavor-wise with this pour. It's a really good whiskey. And it doesn't really make any apologies or hide what it is, which is why I think it's the absolute perfect pour for today's topic. Now, I'm not sure long term that I want this stream to be a never-ending evaluation of e-commerce platforms. I mean, that seems to be what you guys want. So here we are. I mean, this topic is commercetools, an enterprise platform focused on API-driven headless commerce. Now, this is probably the most requested platform we've ever had on this stream. A lot of folks are curious and wanting to know more about commercetools. Now, commercetools was founded in 2006, and they've been doing headless since before it was cool. And that foresight into what e-commerce would and is still becoming has given them a tremendous decade-long head start over just about every other e-commerce platform that has seen them steadily rise on things like the Gartner Magic Quadrant or the Forrester Wave. Now, I'm looking forward to learning more about how that laser focus on headless from the beginning, along with the huge head start, have helped the platform be a leader in the space. Now, I'm going to ask some questions at the start of the stream, but please post your thoughts and comments in the chat, and we'll get to those shortly. We do have a hard stop at the top of the hour, so we're going to go exactly an hour, and we're going to call it an afternoon. Now, my guest today is Kelly Goetsch, Chief Product Officer of commercetools. Kelly has literally written the books, plural, on API-driven commerce. He has a pedigree that is steeped in headless and microservices experience, including leading product management for microservices initiatives at Oracle before joining the team at commercetools. Kelly, I appreciate you taking the time to join us this afternoon. Hey, you there? Apparently, Kelly has not joined us yet. Kelly may have dropped for just a second. That's what he looks like, though, in case you were wondering. That's him. That's his face. But Kelly joined us late there, so let's make sure he didn't have any technical difficulties, and I'll run it for just a few minutes. I think I can handle the stream by myself, although I'm probably not qualified to talk about commercetools. But let's give Kelly just a second. Pretty much the story of how my Friday's going. You guys let me know how your Friday's going here in the chat, and I'm sure Kelly will be back online here in just a second. We are having some storms here. I'm not sure if he's having any issues there, but it is what it is. If anybody in the chat has actually tried Stag Junior, let me know. I'm usually more of a Blanton's fan. This is kind of from that same family of Blanton's, that mash bill number 2 at the Buffalo Trace Distillery that you get in so many of their most popular products. But a lot of people have reached out and wanted to know more about commercetools. Headless is obviously a big thing these days, and a lot of platforms are trying to migrate toward a headless experience. They want to take what is their traditional theming and make it more suitable for PWAs. But obviously, commercetools has been around since before PWAs were even a thing. And so their headless approach definitely makes them unique in the space. Again, it looks like Kelly dropped off there, so hopefully he will show back up here in just a second, and we will be able to continue the live stream. Sometimes that's what happens with going live. All right. I don't know. I'm going to run out of things to talk about here in just a second. Mighty quiet in the chat today. So looks like Kelly is back with us here. Kelly, I set you up. There you go.
Hey,
thanks for joining us this afternoon.
My pleasure. I've had rock solid internet for years and years and years and years. Never had an issue until you were just queuing me up to join, and then all of a sudden you froze. So, I mean, talk about perfect timing, right?
Now, I understand. I'm going to take, just to make sure we have a little less problem with that, I'm going to kick the feed back to you down a notch, to make sure. So your quality, what you see is going to get a little worse. Don't worry. What I've got coming through over here is just fine.
Perfect.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to go with the first question here. Obviously, commercetools has been focused on headless since before headless was cool. So what led commercetools to focus on an API-driven headless approach a decade before anyone else?
Well, there's an interesting founding story to commercetools. So the founder and CEO of commercetools, Dirk Horig, was actually college roommates with the Hybris founders. But he joined the house, so they all had a house rented. He joined that house just after Hybris itself was founded. And Dirk founded an agency called commercetools to do the very first Hybris implementations in the world. So the very first, I think, 4 Hybris implementations were all from commercetools, and the first commercetools office was actually in the Hybris office in Munich when the company was like a 10-person company. So we actually got our start very early, and was very well connected with those Hybris folks. And Dirk built up a really successful business doing Hybris implementations. But what happened is in 2010, 2011, Dirk saw the need for a real cloud native commerce platform, because Hybris and WebSphere Commerce and ATG, which is now Oracle, and all of those legacy platforms, they were all built before cloud, right? They were single tenant hosted applications. Many cases they were run on-prem. They were not API based. They were not headless. They were built on and for the web. So he raised a bunch of money, bold decision at the time, but it ended up paying off, and built an entirely new team in Berlin, and built that commerce platform from scratch and launched it in 2013 and completely went cold turkey on all of the Hybris business. So we haven't touched as a company a Hybris implementation since 2012. And now we're 100% product focused since then. But Dirk actually invented that headless commerce. So we were the very first to market with a headless commerce platform.
So if a merchant wants to use the platform, like what does that look like being headless? I mean, there is no interface to start with. You provide, reference examples or some sort of starter kit in different programming languages. Like, what's the process to go from I signed up for commercetools to I have a fully functioning e-commerce experience?
Well, I should first start by talking about who we sell to. So we sell to large enterprises doing more than $100 million a year online. And a normal customer for us, a good solid customer for us, does $1 billion a year online, $2 billion, $3 billion. And we have one customer who does $6 billion a year online. And at the very top end of our market, people are deciding between going out and hiring 50 or 100 developers and building something from scratch, like what Target did and Walmart did and Amazon did, or they're looking at buying us. And we do have smaller customers, but to us, a really small customer does 50 million a year online. I don't think we go any lower than that. But a standard small customer who does 100 or 200 million dollars a year online, that's a good customer for us. But they're looking for something a little different. They want more of a fully featured platform. So in that case, what we offer is a Storefront Accelerator. And again, we've never shipped with a head to our platform, a front end, because we were founded on the notion that we don't know what the future will hold, right? We don't know what those customer touch points will be. So we figured let's only expose APIs. So we don't see it as a deficiency necessarily, like we're missing something. It's a feature of what we offer, which is we offer commerce tools, right? And then you can build or buy your own front end. So we have partners like Frontastic, Mobify, for example, View Storefront, and you can pick up one of those front ends. They all have commercetools connectors, and you can pick those up off the shelf and start using them. But we also have a lot of folks who build a front end from scratch. And these days, it's not that hard. So we're pretty unopinionated in that regard. And we have some customers who just use us in industrial settings, and they have a robot ordering stuff from us through our APIs. We have some who only sell on social media platforms through Instagram, and they're calling us. We have some traditional who use a website and an app. So we as a platform we're not opinionated in that regard. It's whatever our customers want to do.
I wanted to remind everyone who's just tuning in to post your questions in the chat. We're going to get through my questions, and then we will chime in with yours. We are going to stop at the top of the hour, so we'll be getting around to your questions here shortly. So
don't mind me. I have my bourbon. I figured as long as you set the example, right?
Yes. What kind of bourbon do you have?
I've been drinking Bullet recently. I like
Okay.
Bullet.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. I don't think I have a bottle of Bullet back here, but that's a fine bourbon.
I know. I'm sure it's pretty amateurish as far as seasoned whiskey drinkers go, but you know what? It's a pretty damn good whiskey. I can buy it locally, so I'll take it.
I have a lot of just off the shelf whiskey, right? Like get it anywhere type of whiskey. That doesn't make it bad. There's a lot of the best whiskey is just off the shelf like that. It's really, subtle nuances, preference, and hype that ends up making you stand in line for something like this Stag Junior right here. So just because it's available doesn't mean it's bad for sure.
Very true.
Yeah. So third-party support via marketplace. A lot of if I'm going to sign up for Shopify or Magento or BigCommerce or really anybody, that the market I'm accustomed to, the market that is the fit for those platforms typically is going to rely very heavily on third-party tools. With you guys being headless first, does that complicate a third-party support? How fleshed out is your third-party support? Like, is it different than it would be for other platforms based on the fact that you're going after that kind of ultra enterprise market? Just kind of fill us in on how your third-party support looks like.
We do have a marketplace, and we have, something like 30 different integrations posted. That being said, it's not that widely used, and it's because of a philosophical difference between us and those legacy platforms. We are not a platform per se. A traditional platform, you look at something like Magento, for example, that is the hub of your front office, right? That is the thing. And then that thing is used, intermediates calls to every other third party that's out there, right? So if you want to change how inventory works, for example, you change it in Magento. If you want to change, your fraud provider, right, you do that in Magento. We're fundamentally different than that. What we are is a collection of APIs. Right? We have 300 of them, and a lot of our customers will say, you know what, we don't want to use you for inventory management. We have our own API for that. And then in the front end, they'll just call their own inventory and they'll just disregard our inventory, right? Or they'll customize us through a Lambda function. You can inject serverless functions into our platform to customize them. Or they'll integrate with a third party. But the difference is that we're not the hub, right, where everything is intermediated through. So it's not like we have a huge need for a ton of integrations because, again, we're providing a bunch of APIs. So think of us, think of a CMS, think of payment, think of third-party inventory management, right? We're part of a toolbox or cran box of things that can then be consumed. And if somebody doesn't want something in our platform, they just don't call it. So there are a few things that you need, but generally not. And another difference is just the market that we're in. I was just on a customer call and they have AS400s that they're trying to integrate with. We have customers all over the place. So it's not like our customers want a website in a box necessarily. And if you're doing a couple million a year online, you want to go to Shopify or Magento and sign up and get, for better or worse, you want a website in a box, which is cool. Right. That's great. If I were at that segment of the market, I would too. But our customers, almost always, it's very, very, very bespoke integrations with legacy back office. It's not the plug and play. I'm going to pick up something off the shelf, use it, and then go to the marketplace and then pick my integrations. It's fundamentally different approach than that philosophically.
Right. So if one of these customers is borderline, they're not that super high enterprise, but they're doing considerable amount in sales. They're looking at you guys versus, say, a platform like Magento, where it's this legacy all-in-one box that has evolved to do headless, and they want to they obviously want to leverage the headless aspect if they're considering you versus Magento. What would be the reason they would choose you? Like, why would you be fundamentally better for that type of merchant than something like Magento would?
It's a bunch of different things. First, we are multi-tenant SaaS. So we offer APIs and we have an API contract, right? And the APIs are evolvable. So we constantly push new features and functionality to our APIs. We improve the way our APIs work, but we don't break that contract. So in our world, there's no such thing as an upgrade, right? With Magento, you have upgrades all the time. You also have the Magento 1 to Magento 2 upgrade. You literally don't have that with us because we've built our APIs in a way that they can be consumed and they're evolvable on an ongoing basis. So that's one thing is we're constantly improving the platform when we push it out as a service. And on that, we're a service. So you sign up and you get an API key, and then you can start hammering api.commercetools.com, and you can start accessing that functionality immediately. So you don't have to find somebody to host it for you, set it up, install it. If the database dies, it's not your concern. All right. We have a great team in Germany that does that, right, at scale. So we don't have the concept of an environment, right? We just have projects. So you could create a development project, fill that up with data, do your development, and kill it, all over the course of an hour. Or some customers spin these environments up for a minute, and run some testing and then kill it. So we're very data driven in that regard, and very, it's not the concept of like, I'm going to go spin up a development server, right? It's a different approach than that. We're also API first and API only. So we started by modeling our APIs and then doing the implementation. So our headless support is 100%. It's very strong. We support GraphQL. We were actually the first commerce platform to support GraphQL. And we have almost 100% coverage for both queries. Well, we have 100% for queries, but almost 100% for mutations, which is something we're really proud of. And then we're also very open, and I mean open as in a lot of our customers will buy us and they'll use 85% of us, but then they'll build around us. But they're not. The difference is that they're not building. We don't have commercetools developers. We have developers who work on our platform because we expose REST APIs, and you use the cloud to customize us. So we event data out to public clouds, and you can inject serverless functions into our platform. So you don't really need commercetools developers per se. You need developers, right? And it's different than having like Magento developers who need to intrinsically understand how Magento works. And if you want to change how logging works or anything of that sort, we don't have that. That just doesn't exist as a concept because, again, it's a cloud native platform. We're built on and for the cloud natively. So it's different. We're serving a different market, but I really do believe that multi-tenant SaaS APIs, that's really the present and the future. And I think if you look at Gartner Magic Quadrant, where we were just named a leader. You look at the Forrester Wave, we were also named a leader there. I think that's really good validation for what we've done and what we've pioneered as a company.
Absolutely. And that's an interesting point. The fact that you don't need developers for the platform. You need developers for whatever you choose to build your tooling in. Are there any platforms that are more common or more prevalent that you see your customers using to build that functionality than others?
For cloud, we're GCP, probably 80% GCP based. But we also do run on AWS if you want it. Most of our customers choose GCP. Okay. They don't want AWS because we have a lot of retail customers and they don't want to feed the things that is putting them out of business. Even though I argue that, AWS has a really good cloud. And then, for various reasons, people aren't terribly into Microsoft and their Azure offering. So a lot of folks use GCP.
Mighty quiet in the chat on this live stream. Keep those questions coming. We do have one there, but keep posting them and we will get to them here in just a second. At this size market that you're servicing, are merchants typically coming to you directly, or is this kind of an agency-led model as well?
It's about half and half. Definitely half and half. In Europe, it's more partner-driven. In the US, it's more direct leads. And even if somebody comes to us directly, they typically have a partner involved. We don't see a ton of agencies, but it's more systems integrators who come to us than anything.
Which one do you prefer? Agencies are a pain in the ass to deal with, aren't they?
It's like asking me to pick my favorite child.
Nobody's watching. Don't worry. We won't post this all over social media.
I know, right? We do a lot of business with EPAM, with Vaultec. We have a lot of ATG, which is now Oracle Commerce SIs, who have switched over to us because we've been the #1 destination for ATG customers leaving that platform. So organizations like E2X and McFadden, we've done a lot of business with. I mean, I don't want to leave anyone out. We do business with dozens and dozens of partners, but it's just different because, again, going back to my ATG days when I was an ATG developer, I mean, you almost had to be a brain surgeon because the core platform was something like 8 million lines of code. And I'm assuming it's similar with Magento. So if you wanted to extend or customize or change some behavior, you needed to know exactly where to go and how to make that change, right? It was a very, the complexity was on the inside of that application. And with commercetools, we do lots of business with lots of different partners, a lot more than in the ATG days, because again, you don't need to be that brain surgeon level, have that level of knowledge for commercetools, because everything that we expose is, the documentation, right? We have really nice documentation for APIs, the RAML compliant. Like, it's just not that hard to consume an API. And that's not to minimize the work our partners do, but they're more focused on how do we integrate with that AS400 in the back end, rather than how do we call a REST API, right? That's the easy part.
Yeah. So where do you think Headless is going? I mean, you guys had the head start. You've written the book on it. Like, where is e-commerce going over the next decade?
I think we're going to continue to see this bifurcation in the market. I think at the lower end, and by lower end, I mean revenue wise,
right?
You're going to see BigCommerce and Shopify. I don't know how Magento is going to do long term, but those types of offerings for more of those SMBs where they want a website in a box, and that's a great market. Look at the valuation of Shopify and look at the purchase price that Adobe paid for Magento. I mean, look at IPO for BigCommerce, right? That's a very valuable, good market. But at that end of the market, folks want a website in a box, right? They don't want that complexity. They want more templates. They want everything to be integrated as a suite. But in the enterprise space, you see a very, very rapid shift towards what we're doing, which is why we were named a leader for the first time. And you look at Oracle Commerce, which is ATG, that's dead. Oracle just had a massive layoff and laid off half of that whole team. And look, that platform was built in '97, back when Jeff Bezos was, still working as a stock trader, that's a long time ago. I mean, a very long time ago, back in that day. And it's hard to you can't fundamentally modernize an old platform. And I'll get into that. Ask me about that in a minute, and I have a whole thesis on that.
Okay.
But I think at the enterprise space, though, I mean, you look at all the different touch points. The number of touch points is exploding. We have social, we have different devices. Apple's coming out with these augmented reality glasses soon, and every one of those customer touch points is a potential shopping opportunity. So I think we'll continue to see the rise of what we're doing. And also what's interesting is this multi-tenant model, right? Multi-tenant API based is really the default now. If you look at the public clouds, that's what they're all focused on. And just a funny anecdote, I hired a lot of product managers at commercetools. I've hired, 12, 13 of them, something like that. And I used to ask folks what the difference was between single and multi-tenancy. And what was interesting is I had people who were really good product managers and who otherwise did really well in the interview, and they had no idea what I was talking about. I mean, they just didn't understand the concept of the question that I was asking them. And I mean, you and I are old enough to know exactly what that's meant by, right?
Not that old.
What I found is that nobody under the age of like 28 understood multi-tenancy because it just didn't exist. Like everything is multi-tenant in their world, right? If you're 28, if you're in your 20s, you've grown up in a fully multi-tenant world. The whole concept of like going to a website, downloading, some big application, compiling it into a WAR file or EAR file, throwing it to an application server, connecting it to a database, right? Like that whole thing, that whole life cycle just doesn't exist to folks because they're used to, they went to high school and were using AWS in high school. I mean, that's the type of world that they live in. So funny generational divide.
Well, that is interesting though. The question is, what will the next generation not have to deal with that this generation does though? It's easy to see that's the world we live in now, right? Like it's as these SaaS platforms become more capable, then yes, those who just want something easy and out of the box are going to have a lot of options to be able to do that. But where does that, I guess, where does that take the market? Like, what is the next thing, especially in that higher mid-market and enterprise market? Is it, for you guys, is there, some big roadmap? Is it just more APIs, more functionality, more integrations, or is there some shift in technology that we're going to see on the horizon as well?
It's two things. First, we see GraphQL everywhere. And I actually just wrote a book on it for O'Reilly this year. It was published in January, GraphQL for Modern Commerce. It's such a cool technology. Do you think I should explain it, or
we don't have a ton of questions. I think it's a pretty technical conversation. We do have a few we'll get to shortly, so we've got time. Go into it.
Sure. GraphQL is graph query language. So it's something that Facebook invented and popularized and put out there. And it's now used by Facebook, Twitter, New York Times, lots of big consumer-facing brands use it. And what it allows you to do as a front-end developer is you can query your APIs in the same way that you'd query a relational database. So you could say for product detail page, I want this product. And for this product, I want its price, I want its display name, I want its product images, right? And you can get really, really prescriptive over what you want. You send that to the server. That server will then call the appropriate APIs, and it will return back over the wire exactly what is requested. Nothing more, nothing less. And that data might live behind 3, 4, 5, 6 different APIs. So as a front-end developer, it dramatically simplifies what you're doing on a daily basis, right? Because now you can just query things. So I think that's one, and we're seeing everyone use it. I mean, all these big name organizations out there, like Lego.com, for example, they're one of our customers. Every single request to Lego.com is GraphQL based. It's a GraphQL query behind the scenes. And I have lots more, really big, well-known brands who all use exclusively GraphQL. But it's at least 75% of the customers we've signed in the past year use GraphQL. So that's one big trend, and that's an exciting trend, and I'm happy to see that it's spreading out there. And the second is customizations and extensions through functions as a service. So the first couple of years we were in the market, we had customers build basically a wrapper layer, right? So if you have Acme Corp, right? They would have Acme product API, and then that was a separate microservice. And then you'd have Acme, category API, and those would call back to the respective commercetools APIs. But from the front end, you would call the Acme APIs, right? So now you have a backend for your front end. You have a layer in there. And the problem with that is now all of a sudden, the SDKs that we provide no longer work, because you basically have your own layer there. And now you have another layer to manage, which defeats the whole purpose of headless commerce. And what we've seen is as the public cloud offerings have matured, we see people switching over to something that we've actually invented and patented, but you can inject serverless functions into our platform. And an example of that is, and I didn't know this, commercetools is obviously a German company, But in Germany, there's a national law that says you can only buy 6 cases of beer in one transaction. So whether you're in person or whether you're online, you can only buy 6 cases of beer. And you can model that as a function. So you can go to Google Cloud Functions or AWS Lambda, and you can write a very simple function to check the contents of the cart and look at the beer category and see if there are more than 6 items in that category. And you can inject that function into commercetools, which is a pretty exciting way of doing things. And that way, you don't even have to have developers of a specific language. So now you can have Java and JavaScript developers and Python developers, because now you're just injecting these functions and it doesn't matter what language they run in, right? So it further democratizes commerce tech, which is what we are all about. And again, you don't need, commercetools developers, you need developers.
Yeah. Whatever works for your business, right?
Yeah, exactly. Different approach.
I understand. Well, let's get to the questions in the chat, and then we'll come back if we have time to my questions here. I think we've already touched on Mindy's question here. How would that compare to another SaaS platform that does headless like Shopify, which also has APIs that get new features? Mindy, we kind of touched on that a little bit. Obviously this is a much larger scale for much larger scale organizations. It is designed API first, and so you don't really have any other options. Is there anything other than what we've already said that you want to add to that particular question, Kelly?
No, I think Shopify is an excellent platform, but it's different. It is a suite and it's meant for smaller businesses. Again, great market, just different market from us. I do have to say their APIs aren't as good as ours. And I mean that in a respectful way, but they're not, because they were built before the era of headless commerce, right? So we always started out by first modeling the APIs and then doing the implementation of the code behind those APIs. And when you do that, you end up designing APIs that are really, really, really easy to consume. And it's really hard to retroactively slap on APIs to a product that didn't have them before.
Mindy's follow-up question, also just wondering, when you talk about being API only, I thought I had read that commercetools had a control panel. Is that correct? And if I'm correct, how does that work when a new feature comes out?
Well, we do have our Merchant Center, which is business user tooling, and that's all React and GraphQL based. And that is we have a whole team of 8 professional designers who've done the UI design, the UX design, done a great job. And there you can manage your product catalog, you can manage your orders, right? You can do all of those things that, so we're headless in that we don't provide the customer facing head, but we do provide a head for business users, because business users don't buy APIs. Business users want to see something. And, look, all of our customers use this tooling. So there you can manage your project, you can set your default language. And of course, everything is exposed through an API, so you can select your default currency through an API. But a lot of folks, even developers, would rather just do it through a nice interface. So we do have a head, it's just not for the consumers. It's only for business users.
Wilson has a follow-up question on that particular merchant panel. How does the Merchant Center and PIM work? Do all customers get that, and can it be customized?
Yes, every single customer gets access to the Merchant Center. And like all of our software, it is SaaS. So it's just merchantcenter.commercetools.com. And then you can customize it. So you can snap in custom applications. You can change the behavior of specific screens. So it is very customizable and extensible. And we have to do that because enterprises have such unique workflows that, it's inevitable that they have to customize and extend it.
Jumping over to LinkedIn, coming from ATG World, I see a lot of customers hesitant to move away from the monolith, although they clearly know the value. How easy or hard is it to port existing legacy commerce platforms to commercetools as a whole? Also, can a mix-up of modules, make sure I understand this. Okay, can a mix of modules be done with legacy and commerce tools together. So just to kind of reiterate that, how easy is it to migrate? Like, is it I'm assuming it's just a complete redo, but how easy is it to migrate from existing platforms? And have you seen examples of customers keeping their legacy platform and then utilizing commerce tools alongside that in some way?
Yes. So we've done, I think 14 now, maybe more, ATG to commerce tools migrations, including some of their bigger organizations. So AT&T and Burberry and Express. I mean, we've done lots of these, multi-million, multi-billion dollar brands. And the way they almost exclusively all do it is they use the strangler approach from Martin Fowler. So they'll start by using us just for, say, the product catalog. And they'll take data from their enterprise PIM and they'll feed it to their legacy ATG platform. And then they'll feed that platform, that data to our platform as well. And then what you do, and all of our customers are headless already, right? It's very, very rare that we have a new customer who signs with us who is not already headless. Even with the legacy platforms, almost all the ATG shops at this point are already all headless anyway. So what they'll do is they'll copy their product detail page. And then instead of calling ATG, they'll call us. And then they'll do A/B testing on the front end and make sure that it works and canary release that out until it's 100%. We're getting all the PDP browse traffic. And then they'll do the same thing for categories. And then they'll do the same thing for the home pages and the landing pages. And just week after week after week, they will migrate from the old platform to the new platform until the point they can just turn it off. And it takes at least 6 months. It does. It's not an easy thing. It's a long time. It is difficult, but what's really hard is to do a big bang reimplementation and snap your fingers and go live with something brand new from scratch. That does not work. I wish it did. Does not work at the enterprise level. That's a very good way to get fired if you're a CDO or CTO or something like that. So they all do. There is a multi-month gap there where the two platforms live in parallel together.
All right, the next question from Igor. This sounds like this is an important question at your market. Can you speak to the scalability of your platform? I mean, if you're doing hundreds of millions of dollars, it obviously scales, but how does that work?
We have everything in Docker containers, and then we deploy that to the managed Kubernetes offering that GCP and AWS offer. So GKE in the case of GCP. And that it's pretty straightforward, right? We have pods and we tell Kubernetes when to throw more capacity at it, and we auto scale the entire platform top to bottom. We also provision a whole bunch of extra capacity just for random, just for unnecessary, like unforeseen bursts in traffic. And, again, a challenge we have is we have customers with like social media paid spokespeople. And, folks with 100 million Instagram followers, if one of them posts a link to your product, all of a sudden you get a dramatic spike in traffic. But because we're a multi-tenant, we are dramatically over provisioned anyway. And that way we can auto scale if we need to in the back end. But we have a reserve capacity for any one given customer that needs more capacity within a second. And then we can just auto scale the entire platform. And we preventatively auto scale the platform if we see a quick spike in traffic. We can get new pods provisioned within a minute. It's not that long.
So obviously, though, with being headless, like you're a part of a much larger ecosystem for one of these merchants' implementation. Are there any common bottlenecks that merchants building on commerce tools have to watch out for to make sure that commerce tools, along with everything else, scales?
The problem we have is with commerce tools, you don't need 500 developers like you used to. You need 10 or maybe 20 good developers, people who know their way around public clouds, people who know their way around APIs. You need small quantity teams. You do not need gigantic body shop teams that have lots and lots and lots of low skill people working on these implementations. that is where we've had problems, because people then rewrite things, they screw up implementations. It's not a very good approach to do that. I always recommend that people go for quality rather than quantity. And it's such an enterprise thing. I don't know if you have that the same in the Magento world, but in the enterprise world, folks think that if they have 300 people working on a project, that it's going to be more successful than if they have 30 people working on a project. And it's not true. I would always go for 30 or even 20, right? And get small teams working together. So that's typically what you have.
We have the same problem, but at a much smaller scale. There's a saying we have around here that I try to use to explain that to folks. What one developer can do in 1 day, 2 developers can do in 2 days. So, just adding more is not always better. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left, and we're going to get to the last couple of questions here, and we do have a hard stop at the top of the hour. If you have any more questions, please post them. We'll try to get to them. If we don't get to them, I'll get you an answer and post it in the comments. Thomas over on YouTube, can enterprise brands do this on their own, or do they need partners? I mean, we kind of touched on that a little bit, but people come and go. So, if you're a big, as far as like implement on commercetools.
We have some customers, I'd say it's probably the top 25%, that build it from scratch on their own. And like Lego.com, for example, they have a small dev team in London. They did everything from scratch perfectly, flawlessly. And we have some customers who go and get hundreds and hundreds of people to do it. And again, it's the smaller teams, whether it's in-house or whether it's third-party, smaller specialized teams do much, much better with commercetools. Because you're writing a lot of glue code. You're not writing a lot of functionality from scratch. But yes, I'd say probably 25% of our customers do self-implementations, and they usually are pretty successful with it.
Vlad on YouTube says, are you running your databases on NoSQL, NoSQL, however you want to pronounce that?
Well, I have 2 answers to that. First, you shouldn't have to know or care, because that's the beauty of SaaS, right? Do we know what database powers Gmail behind the scenes? No, because you don't know and you don't care. You just want Gmail to work, right? But to answer the question, we actually use MongoDB. And then we have it set up. So we have CQRS set up, so command query response segregation. And what that means is we have a huge, huge pool of MongoDBs that are for reads. And those are really easy to scale up. And we do that, that's all containerized, and, we can auto scale that, forever. And then we have a smaller cluster just for writes. And what's nice is the 2 different sets are optimized for different things. So if you have a database that's optimized only for writes versus for reads, the 2 are configured very differently. But that's how we do it internally. But again, that's the beauty of a SaaS service, is it truly doesn't matter as long as we're hitting our SLAs, which we do. It doesn't matter how they are, how we implement behind the scenes.
So how does, if a merchant, stumbles upon this and is considering, they're big enough, they're considering commercetools, how does the pricing look like? How do you guys price it out? How is that determined?
It's a function of average order value and the number of orders that you place. But it's on a monthly basis. And then we just define, my colleagues on the commercial side define what that price is. But it's not bad. We're really not that expensive. It used to be with enterprise software, you'd get those unlimited license agreements and you'd write a check for a couple $1 million. This is in the tens of thousands per month. I'll put it that way. And it's just a function of average order value and order volume. So those 2 things.
Okay. We've got one last question here we're going to get to, and we've touched on this a little bit, but again, people come and go. They're asking, can you use commercetools in combination with Shopify? I'm going to, because we've already kind of answered that, I'm going to rephrase that a little bit and say, have you seen anybody use commercetools in combination with a SaaS platform like Shopify? Would there be any reason to do that?
No. And if we ever came across Shopify in a deal, we would ask ourselves if we should be there, or if we're at the wrong table, or if they're at the wrong table, because we never see an organization look at both commercetools and Shopify at the same time. It would be one or the other. And if they're looking at both and they don't know what, if they're looking at both together, then they probably are not. They don't have a very good understanding of the commerce market, and one of us is at the wrong table.
I understand. Who are you most competing with?
Salesforce.
Okay.
Salesforce Commerce Cloud.
That's who you're almost butting heads. I mean, almost always, or are there several players in that market?
At the very top end of our market, we're competing against build it yourself.
Right.
And there, the decision is always, do we hire a bunch of folks and build it from scratch, or do we use commercetools? And it's always one of those two only. That's it. That's the very top end of our market. In the upper end of our market and down to the mid, we see Salesforce quite a bit, which is odd because it's the anti-commerce tools in many ways as well. They sell to business, we sell to IT, but they have a good product and they're very competitive. We don't see Elastic Path really. I mean, they market themselves as headless, but that's still a pretty old legacy platform. So we don't really see them. We don't see BigCommerce. They're too small for us. We don't often see Magento, maybe in some B2B, some smaller B2B deals we do, but not that often at all. We never see Shopify ever. Who else is there out there? SAP, Hybris, we never lost them for new, but we have had some customers say, you know what, I'm going to kick the can down the road another year or two, and we'll do the reimplementation in 2 years. Oracle Commerce, which is OCC, Oracle Commerce Cloud, and ATG. They're not competitive. They don't sell anymore. And we've been winning a lot of those deals. IBM WebSphere Commerce sold off to HCL. So we don't see them at all ever. Those customers are, if you're still on WebSphere Commerce, there's something very seriously wrong. The product was built in like 93. So that if you look at the tech adoption bell curve, the folks still on WebSphere Commerce are at the very, very right end of that tail of the bell curve. They're very much laggards, and they're not going to be looking at commerce tools.
So we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left here, though. I wanted to give you a chance to touch on what you said a minute ago before your hard stop, and that is you can't upgrade a legacy platform.
No, and I'll see if I can do this in a couple minutes, but I have a whole thesis on it.
That may be a whole different stream we have to schedule.
No, I'd actually really like that because I'm pretty passionate about this. What ends up happening is let's take ATG, right? ATG is a classic example of this. ATG became successful, and they ended up having, I think it was something like 1,500 active customers. All of those 1,500 active customers built implementations for that specific product. Right, they all had everything, was built around and for ATG. If ATG suddenly refactored and they went completely headless and they went microservices and SaaS and everything that we do, they would have to go to those 1,500 existing maintenance paying customers and say, hey, we've got this crazy new thing over here. You have to throw out your implementations that took you 5 years to do and re-implement from scratch. And at that point, all of those 1,500 customers are going to look around and say, hey, you know what? Do I really want to be an ATG customer anymore? Maybe there's somebody else out there like commercetools that really does a headless commerce better. And they're going to go with that new competitor because it costs a lot of money to acquire every single customer. So what these vendors do is they keep you locked in, and they incrementally will upgrade the platform, but they can't fundamentally change it because, again, that would force reimplementations. And if you look in the Magento world, you have this played out with Magento 1 versus Magento 2. I mean, look at the poor adoption of Magento 2, right? We've picked up quite a few Magento customers because they didn't want to make that upgrade from Magento 1 to Magento 2. I know Shopify has had a huge influx of new customers because of that as well. People don't do full reimplementations from scratch. Once you buy the product, that product is more or less the product that they expect, and they will not change it. It's innovator's dilemma. That's what it comes down to. It's classic innovator's dilemma.
That's definitely an interesting topic for an entirely different live stream. I'll hit you up about that. We'll see about getting that on the schedule. I appreciate you joining us this afternoon. Thank you for your time. It was definitely an interesting conversation. I learned a lot about commercetools and their position in the market. If anybody else out there has any more questions, let me know, and I will forward those to Kelly and try to get those answered. Just post those in the chat. But if you would, Kelly, tell everyone how they can get in touch with you if they need to.
LinkedIn, Twitter, go to commercetools.com. You can find me just about anywhere. But yeah, my name's out there. Please do drop me a note.
All right, we had a lot of fun on the stream this afternoon. I've got a crazy video coming out next week. If you see the video about 6 scammers that took $100,000 in bribes and turned it into $100 million in sales on the Amazon platform, watch the video and then send me your questions. I'll forward them to Kelly or find him out there. I found him on Twitter. And so we don't have any other live streams booked at this point, but we're working on some. I'll let you know as soon as those get scheduled, but I appreciate y'all watching, and I'll see you next time.